So a couple of things. One is I do want to focus on that we're talking about internal collaboration. So it's very different than communicating with external audiences. And oftentimes people will, at first blush, diplomats will say, oh, this sounds a lot like what our public affairs folks do. This is what the external communications folks do. This is not relevant for me as a political or economic or management or consular officer. And what I want to say is that's not true. It's as essential for you, whatever stripe of diplomat you are. So don't try to balkanize this as something that's only for the outward-facing public affairs folks. That's my first point. I do want to tell a little about where e-diplomacy came from. So we also are 10 years old, and we were born out of 3 failures. Nothing begets success like failure. I spent a fair amount of time in Silicon Valley, where failure is considered a badge of honor. You can't succeed until you fail, because you don't know what success looks like if you don't know what failure looks like. And the 3 failures, big failures that begat e-diplomacy was first the West Africa embassy bombings, then 9/11, and following that, a not 4 million franc, but a $14 million effort at a hierarchical command and control effort at knowledge management. It was the idea was to build a system where people would send their information and others would come to look for it. It was very complicated. It was not intuitive. It was an extra layer of effort on top of the normal workflow, and it failed miserably. And coming out of that, then Secretary of State Colin Powell decided to put the end users into the IT decision-making process. So our office is made up of diplomats of all kinds. So we have in the State Department, in our foreign ministry, we have 5 kind of generalist diplomats: political, economic, consular, management, and public affairs. And we have people from all of those groups in our office. And also, one of the benefits, I think, was that we weren't given much of a budget. Poverty can create a tremendous entrepreneurial spirit. If you have lots of money, you can spend it on dumb things, and people can convince you to spend your money on dumb things. And when you have money, people are always coming at you trying to sell what they have. If you don't have any money, you have to be really creative, and that's what we did, was go to these open source tools like MediaWiki for our Diplopedia. First we used movable type for our blogs, our internal blogs, and then we moved to WordPress when the rest of the world moved to WordPress. We also have used to build our kind of LinkedIn behind the firewall. BuddyPress, which is an extension of WordPress. And then for analytics, to see how many people are using it, we have an open source tool called Piwik. So all of these we were able to adopt and adapt ourselves at very little cost. But here is where I want to give some advice about giving a bear hug to your friends, your colleagues who work in technology in your institution. So the person who's the CTO or the information officer or the IT professional, those people should be your best friends. Because if they're your partner, they'll help you figure out how to do it. If you go to them saying, I need, not a discussion, but a demand, you're less likely to find that you'll get to where you want to go. And at this point, I want to ask all my colleagues who work at our US missions here in Switzerland, could you raise your hand? Okay, look at these folks. They can help explain to you what we've done. So they should have many offers to go out for coffee and lunch, and you can learn from them all the great things that we're doing. And many of them are our IT professionals. So as you think of, the way I like to think about it, we used to think of the IT folks, the people working in IT, as kind of the electronic plumbers. You know, when something's broke, you give a call, but otherwise they're kind of not part of your conversation. And we need to think of them as problem solvers, that in both how technology can help you do your job, as well as how technology can help you achieve policy outcomes. So it's kind of like IBM. Think IBM 25 years ago they were a hardware manufacturer that made big computers, and now they're a service company. Try to think of that model in your head. Another thing I just want to say is change is inevitable. This is already happening. It's happening in businesses. There's a movement called Enterprise 2.0. There's an author at MIT who wrote that book. His name's McAfee. It's really the future of how does a large organization know what it knows? The CEO of Hewlett-Packard, Lou Platt, once said, if HP only knew what HP knows, we'd be 3 times more productive. Well, I like to say if the State Department only knew what the State Department knows, we'd be closer to world peace. And that's kind of our job is if there are 2 people in the State Department who don't even know each other, but they each have, or one has a piece of information or context which is incredibly important to another, how do we increase the probability that they'll discover each other? How do you make serendipity more routine? That's the job that we've embraced, and I think we've done a lot to kind of achieve that. Really, it's thinking that the workplace is changing, and these tools, and again, I can give a quick thumbnail of what these tools are, but would encourage you, if you're interested in knowing more, to come at the session later this afternoon. But think of sharing information as a continuum from sharing static information, so information that doesn't change that often, to sharing information that's on the fly, something I've got a question right now and I want to get an answer right now. And we've developed kind of a whole suite of platforms that do that, as well as developing a new one now which will help you filter information. So that's a big challenge that people say is information overload. I just got way more information than I can absorb. So how do I take this fire hose of information and get just the pieces of it that I need? And we're developing a platform that's a lot like NetVibes, which will allow our diplomats to be able to filter those flows, whether it's external flows from news sources or from Twitter or from social media, or internal flows, so even our internal cables, and to be able to filter those, find the thing I'm looking for, and once you identify some tidbit of information that you think is really important, instead of sharing it via email with the 5 people who you know want to see it, you can share it on our professional networking platform where there's 11,000 people who might be interested in seeing it. So you really, again, drive up the probability that if somebody identifies something important, the right person will then find that information. It's a way of thinking that is intuitive to digital natives, people who are growing up now. And increasingly, that'll be the workplace that they'll look for. I spoke with a head of human resources for a Fortune 50 company, a gigantic company that was well known and well respected for being one of the best 10 employers in the world. And this head of human resources said that they were having, even in this relative weak economy, we're having people quit, young people right out of college after like less than a year quit. And so they started interviewing them and saying, well, why are you leaving? And these young people were saying, well, this is a hostile work environment. And they said, wait a minute, how could that be? We're family friendly, we're different lifestyle friendly, we let people take leave for family. How could this be a hostile work environment? And these young people said, all the tools I use to be productive and collaborative, you block. I am more productive at home than I am at work. This is a hostile work environment. So if this is the image of people, best and brightest going to the best companies at the top salary, and they're willing to quit because the environment doesn't suit the way they think and work and collaborate, that's going to be the future for the people we bring in. Obviously, diplomacy is a profession which is always going to draw people, but we want to continue to draw the best and the brightest. And to do that, we need to create an environment where they want to work and where they'll be successful. in working the way that, that diplomacy will be done in the future.